Hey guys, this video has been a long time coming. This is a walkthrough of the new Token Attacher 4.0. You're looking at a marketplace built with a bunch of prefabs that were done using Token Attacher. And this one is with 4.0 because now you can connect prefabs and you can do other things that you couldn't do before. And so this is a walkthrough of Token Attacher as a module. I'm going to go through what's possible, what has been possible, and what's now possible going forward. You're looking at that same marketplace dragged out instantly from an actor tab with all of the other prefabs connected, and then I'm disconnecting them and I'm moving them around and rearranging them. This just, I've said this before, I think Token Attacher is probably one of the most important modules in Foundry today because it completely liberates your content and creates things that DMs can use over and over again. You're looking at naval battles and vehicles. It works well with other modules like the vehicles modules, so you can actually move these vehicles around. And new to this version, you can resize things. So you're seeing that whole keep just turned into half the size. You can do things like laying damage tiles down instantly. Here we're using some of my maps to basically create damage instantly, with very, very little effort. And this is really fun. I'll show you how to do this in this video, but you can now attach tokens to other tokens. So now we're deploying whole phalanxes of soldiers instantly into a battlefield. And you can rearrange them, move them around. There's a bunch of optimizations that have happened with this version. There's a bunch of new quality of life tools that are KLG has deployed, and he's really the developer behind this. It's just done an amazing job of making this super useful. So here I just broke out a bunch of these, and now you can also deploy things like traps and spell effects and portals. So I'm going to give you examples of all of these, and all of these examples are inside of my, I publish a couple of premium packs specifically for Foundry, and all of these things are deployable assets in those packs. So if you want to try these out, you can come find me on my Patreon. I've got a free version as well, but this is a lot of fun. This changes the game for what you can do with your players in your game. So without further ado, let's jump into the tutorial. Okay, so first things first, let's start with the basics, the things that Token Attacher has been able to do for those of you who have not used it yet. It's always been able to attach anything to a token. Walls, drawings, images, tiles, sounds, even journal notes can all be attached to a token. And that lets you not only group things together in your maps for convenience, but also lets you make prefabs of all of those things where you can deploy them out of your actor's compendium anytime you want. I'm going to show you some examples of that. Once they're all connected, you can move, rotate, even copy and delete everything together as a single unit. So you can imagine what sorts of things that can do for you. And again, I'm going to show you some examples of how to use it. And you can always save those tokens and their attachments, like I said, as prefabs in your actor library. And that's where we get into the power of Token Attacher for the GM to make things that are instantly deployable and can even be very, very complex things. Or have very complex things like macros and other things associated with them that maybe you don't even have to build. You can just get them from other folks like me and others and just drag them in and start using them. So what's new with Token Attacher 4.0? So the big thing is now you can attach tokens to a token, which means you can also nest tokens together. You can nest prefabs, you can make complex things. You can, there's a whole lot of power that unlocks, and we'll talk about at least some of my ideas around it, what I've deployed. You can also scale up or down all of your attachments. So, if you have a tent or a house and you want that to be twice the size, you can now do that just as easily as you would scale your token normally, which I'll show you how that works. There's some new quality of life tools. Specifically, this new tool here, and I'm going to walk through the UI for Token Attacher, but this new tool is called Quick Edit Mode, and there's even a macro that does the same thing. They're both extremely helpful. I find myself using these all the time but also I do a lot of work with this, but I think you're going to use these a lot as well to make fine adjustments. And then there's some macros also that KLG has included with the token attacher, which do some cool stuff like being able to pick up and carry torches or follow other players around or mount a mount or a vehicle or something like that. Some things that you should know too, token attacher now will drop, if I drop a prefab onto a map, it will still respect all of the Z leveling, but it will take all of the image within the prefab, but it'll take all those images and put them on top of any other images. So you won't have the problem of dropping a prefab and having the images show up underneath another tile, which is just really nice, just in terms of predictability for you as the GM. And it'll also automatically resize an asset to accommodate the scenes with different grids. So if you have an asset that works well on a 100 DPI grid, and all of a sudden you're on a map that uses 200, Token Attacher is now smart enough to know to resize that appropriately, and the asset will render the right way, even if it's not the same grid that it was made on. And it now works by temporarily editing attachments and then saving and locking them. So this is important because this will, break things if you don't respect it. But when you make a prefab and you on a scene and you're done with it, when you close the UI for it or you close the quick edit mode, it will save that prefab in its configured state and it'll lock those items from being moved around. So that's going to be a change in how you do your workflows, but it's important to make sure that everything stays the way that you plan on it staying or when you created it. So some things to remember before we get started. If you already use Token Attacher, you will need to migrate any existing scenes and actors that you've created, as well as any compendiums that you've created. Unless you're using my compendiums, then when you update with my stuff, you'll automatically get the refreshed compendiums that are 4.0 supporting. But if you have compendiums that you've made yourself, you're going to want to update those. And there's some really convenient tools that the developers built into the module to be able to do that. But again, any assets you built in another scene that were token attached, he's got a script that will turn those into the new 4.0 supported attachments. Be careful when you're using this quick edit mode. It essentially unlocks everything for you and lets you make changes. But if you don't relock it afterwards, you can find out that things will be, you'll get some surprises later. And also, if you are using modules like vehicles that can move tokens, you can create problems for yourself if you have, if you've got quick edit mode opened up and you're moving tokens around. So just be wary of things like that. And you still cannot move or delete multiple tokens at once. As much as you might want to drag, 50 tokens, control tokens, 2 squares over, you don't want to do that. There's some easy ways to do that using another token, but you don't want to just grab and mass delete things because you'll find out you'll have artifacts the next time that you open your map up. So let's go over now the Token Attacher UI and the options that are now available through with the 4.0. So let's make a prefab. Let's grab one over here. Let's grab something simple like a torch. This is a torch. By the way, if you hold down Alt, it will automatically make that control token hidden. These control tokens, just to give you an idea of how I use them, I have 2 tokens that I use, and I include them in my compendiums. One is a building token that's larger, and then one is a smaller dot token that's a little bit smaller profile. I use those, I drag them out here to create prefabs. In this case, I've already got one called a torch. So if I select that little dot token, which is sitting right there, but semi-transparent and invisible to users, and I go over here, notice I'm in my actors tools, and this little chain link here is the Token Attacher UI. And you get a few options available to you. Some of them you're familiar with, and this one's new. Let's say that I'm building this from scratch. So I'm going to delete all the attachments. And all I did was just I separated all of these elements from the control token itself. So there's my control token. Here's my tile, which is just a picture of a torch. And then I also have a light. So this light works like any other light. I'm going to make it so that it shines even in daylight. And that's essentially the components of this particular prefab. So let's go ahead and make it. So I'm going to start by putting my control token where I want. By the way, if I have multi-level token regions in here, you're probably going to want you to put your token outside of those, or any vehicle regions or any special drawings that do stuff. I generally will put my tokens outside of it so I don't create any conflicts. But for this one, this is nice and simple. I'm going to go up here, and there's a few ways that I can build this prefab. I can select the tile and I can simply attach it. Or I can, I can do the same thing with the light and I can attach that. I don't really know that you use lock or unlock anymore since it automatically includes that function. But you can also copy all of these elements. So now that I've got everything attached, I can copy them and I can literally paste them onto another one. So let's copy this and let's drag out a new token and let's paste it. So I'm going to open up the config now. Once this config is open, it's only open for the token you've got selected. You can do other things, but as long as this config is open, it's just affecting this one. And let's go ahead and paste the elements there. And now I've just duplicated my token. The other way you can do that is you can, once you have your prefab made, which I'll show you in a second, you can duplicate them from the Actors tab. So now I've got my second token. And I'm going to show you this now. So instead of selecting each individual piece, you now have this select all tool. And this is super convenient. So if I click that tool and I've got my selection cursor over here, now I can select and lasso everything. It says selected objects attached to the token. Close my UI. Now they're all attached. You can see the light is moving and the image is moving. And you can rotate these things. But that select all tool is super helpful. If you just want to lasso everything together, it'll bring in all of the elements within the lasso and it'll attach them to your token in one fell swoop. So that's the connect everything, the attach selected elements and then detach. Notice that if this UI is closed and I go to, for example, my tile tool, I can click it and I can get into the metadata, but I can't delete it, I can't move it, I can't do anything with it. That's because this tile is now locked. It's locked to this token. In order for me to unlock it, I have two options. I can either go back to my token, UI, select it, open up the token attacher thing here, and now you'll notice I can move it around. But let's say you didn't want to go through all that steps. Well, KLG has introduced this item, which is the quick edit mode. And if you click that, you'll notice it gives you a little display that it's on. And then you can move anything around. You can move the control token in case you want to put it in a different spot. You can move any of the individual elements around. And then when you're done, you just go back here and you toggle it off. And now you know that you're done. And now it saves all of these tokens in their current state. But let's say you didn't even want to do that. Let's say you wanted to make it even simpler. Well, he included a macro. So if you go to your macros, compendiums, and you go to token attacher, he's got all these cool macros in here. And I recommend you try all these. He named them TA, so you can find them easily in your macro file once you import them. But this toggle quick edit mode is super helpful. It means as long as it's in your toolbar here, you can toggle it on, make changes, and toggle it off anytime you want. So it's two ways to do the same thing just for ease of use. I do recommend also that when you are looking at his macros, that you just right click and you say import all content, and that'll import all of his macros into your macro folder. I have put those macros here in my hotbar so I can show you how a couple of them work. Okay, before I move on, this is a new addition to Token Attacher that was actually created since I made this video, but I think it's important to put in this tutorial. It's basically a check that happens. So in complex scenes or with complex prefabs, if you drag them onto the scene, it's possible that they can be corrupted because there's some calculations that have to happen before they get saved and committed to the prefab. So KLG's actually included just a couple extra tools to help make sure that you can avoid that if it should happen. So, if we just, pick up something simple like these bushes and we drag them out, you can see that it says, please wait to finish processing. And it says, now it's finished, you can proceed. If I drag it out too quickly and I try to move it too quickly, that one's probably too small to demonstrate. Let me do something bigger here. Let's drag out the whole marketplace. And you see, I tried to move that too fast, and it said it broke it. There's missing links now, meaning if I try to manipulate this, I did things too fast to do it, and there may be some things that are broken. So what you do to fix that is KLG's actually included in his macros this thing called delete missing links. So if you ever find you have yourself with orphaned images because of moving too fast, or the scene was super complex, you didn't get enough time, you can just click this delete images button and it will fix any broken images that might be there. Let's just go into the settings, modular settings. And if we go to token attacher, you now have this token attacher GM menu. And if we open it up, there's some options here inside. One is to force a restart automatic migration. So if you need to remigrate any scenes or maps, you can do those by scene or for everything that you've got. Some things that you need to be aware of when you're doing migration is you want to open up a scene that is the same DPI per square as the assets that you're working with. So for example, all of my assets are generally on 100 DPI, sort of standard Foundry square. And so you'll actually open that scene up and then execute this script, and it'll use that scene to basically just reconfigure all of your actors' assets that are already, it'll look for anything that's a token attacher asset that's already been created as a prefab, and it'll reformat that for the 4.0. So that's super important. The other thing is, if you're using this to migrate all your actor compendiums, you can do the same thing. Again, you don't need to use it for my compendiums because mine are already reformatted. But if you've made your own, what you need to do is you need to unlock your compendium. So if you have toggle edit lock on, it won't work. You need to turn that edit lock off. And now it will go into that compendium and reformat everything for you. And I still recommend you do that with the scene opened up that has the 100 DPI square. It can just be an empty scene if you want to. And then it'll take a few, it really took me a few seconds, and I've got a lot to run through everything. These things you don't need to worry about unless you publish, you probably don't need to worry about them unless you publish a module like I do, but these are some things that are helpful for me as I publish through my compendium or through my BaileyWiki modules. So let's look at now how a couple of these macros work. And these are just simple macros that you may or may not find use for, but they may, maybe replace a couple of other modules that you're using. But let's say my player comes up here to a torch and wants to carry it. If I target that torch and then I select pick up, whoops, let me make sure I select my guy there. There, I pick up this torch is the statement that he makes. And now he can walk around with that and move around, and he's got torch. So you can even make prefab items that they can walk around with. Maybe there's a spell attached to this, some kind of spell effect or other things. So this is how you can use that module or that macro. And then of course you can drop everything. And now I'm free of that torch. Now let's say that torch was a horse or some other vehicle. I can also mount that vehicle. And then, how you actually move around, you have to select everything so that you get the vehicle underneath it. And then you can ride around. Here I'm riding around on my torch horse. But these are just things that you can play around with and see if these are helpful to you in your game as you're playing it. Okay, so now let's look at the types of things that you can make. And I'm hoping to blow some of your minds here, but there's so much that you can do. First of all, you can make buildings. So let's look up a cartographer's guild. This is a guild that I created for my modular town pack that is essentially powered by Token Attacher. But you can see I've got a ready-made building here. Some of the elements involved are I've got the roofs module associated with this roof tile, so that when you hover over it or when your players go inside, the roof automatically goes away. I could have special drawings in here that can teleport my players or do other things. I have a very complex wall setup in order to make this thing render, but once I set it up once and I put it into a prefab, I never have to set it up again. So you can see these walls are all set up and everything's ready to go, and it just drags right out of the compendium or out of your tab. You can put lights in here as well. They can be activated by day or night, just working like any other lights normally would. You can even have special lighting. Let's say you use like community lighting by Blitz. What's great about Token Attacher is it'll respect all of the metadata that's included in all of these elements. So if you have other modules like vehicles or multi-level token, it will maintain all of the special metadata that those things need to work. And so when you drag them out, they'll still work. For me, I've got a lot of buildings. I mean, here's just my, middle class buildings, and I've got a whole like lower class set of buildings. So there's a lot that you can build into that. Of course, you can build vehicles as well. You can build simple vehicles like this cart that you guys have seen me do in other things, but it's got sounds and lights built into it. And you can make really complex vehicles like this frigate here. And this is very complex. So you have tiles going on here. Let me open up the UI for it so you can see. You've got tiles, mainly this main frigate tile here. You've got drawings. There's multi-level token hotspots here so that players can automatically teleport in. You've got all of the walls set up. You've got the lights set up. You've got sounds that you heard, that ambient sort of sailing sound. And of course, you've got all of the journal notes to activate these different teleporters, for example. So very, very complex stuff. There's also a special tile on here that is a vehicles tile that will automatically pick up any tokens that you put on it, and it'll carry them along. Why that's important is because you can wage whole naval battles with these things, and you can move them through your map, and the tokens will move with them. So really, really large scale type things. What else can you build? All right, so you can build trees, obstacles. Let me show you the tree. Here's a simple tree. What you missed, because we're in GM view, is there's a whole canopy that disappears when you walk underneath it. And you can just spam trees all day long, and this is how you make forests and other things and other scenes that you want to just automatically use that. You didn't notice there, but these trees have walls built into them, so they obscure line of sight. It's all that dynamic stuff that you're normally trying to do as a GM, but now you can prefab it and have it done forever. You can build magic doors, like this mansion door. Let's say your players have the Mordenkainen Mansion spell. You can drop a door in that's got all the prefab elements of a teleporter that takes you to your mansion. It's got the tile itself, which you're seeing here. It's got a magic light. Your players you can give them access to this. You can give them permission. Give all players ownership permission. And now this player can drop that mansion door on any map that he or she wants. You can build teleporters. Here's a teleporter that also has sound and lights. So as you get close to it, your players can essentially teleport where they want to go. You can control this as a GM, or you can build a prefab. Like I can make a copy of this, and I'll just duplicate it, and then I'll make this copy able to be interacted with by the players. And now the players can cast their teleport spell, and you can code this teleporter to go to a specific destination. And they can have in their library all sorts of pre-coded teleporters with destinations that they want to go to. We can also do pre-made traps. So I have a bunch of traps with, a grass outline, just square trap. And here's one with, stone outline that has spikes under it. You see they're very faint. It's because the trap comes out already hidden from the players. But if I have a player that I have walk into it, it triggers a sound effect, the tile becomes visible to the player, and you'll see that there's also one-way walls, so the player cannot get out of it unless they, roll to get out of it. So how did I make this trap? Let's look at the config for it. And I had some help from Paf, who's in my Patreon community with this, this macro, but this is a lot of fun. So if I go into the config, what's happening here is there's a multi-level token drawing right in the middle. And it doesn't do anything, it doesn't teleport, although I do have a trap that will drop players into another map, so it works as a teleport. This one just triggers on entry, and it fires a macro. The macro is called Trap Collapse Impact. That's the sound, the type of trap that it is. And then it was looking for that PNG called Trap Stone Spikes to make it visible. And so within my macros compendium is a macro that does that. So these little macros here, you can import them. You import them into your world. You don't have to actually do anything with them. But once they're in your world, it'll look for these macros and it'll fire them whenever your player falls into there. So, you can just deploy traps now all of a sudden that are already made. And, this one will teleport them to another place. Here's one in case you're in a grassy area. It's got grass to surround it. So stuff that you couldn't do before that you can now do with Token Toucher. You can also do summoned effects. This sounds probably ridiculous, but what if I had a player that had the spell to create a ghostly camp? Well, that's what this is. I've got an instant camp that my players can go and cast anywhere and they can camp in it. Or maybe they stumble into a room that has this camp already set up. They fight the ghost and the camp effectively just disappears. So these types of things become possible now that we've got 4.0. The Foundry scenes that are totally drag and drop, I'm going to show you the marketplace here in a second and how that works. But now with 4.0, those vehicles I just showed you, you can pre-populate them with crews. You can put NPCs into the buildings that you make, or enemies into the buildings that you make. You can nest things, which is what I'll show you here in the marketplace, and then I'll show you here in a second how you build a Phalanx of Soldiers that you can deploy anywhere at any time, and all of a sudden build really epic battles that your players weren't expecting. And then you can also obviously use this functionality to just save, copy, and paste complex scenes into new scenes. So you can just use it to kind of move scenes around and recreate things as you need. So with that, let's jump into a couple of these specific demos with 4.0. Okay, so this is the marketplace that you guys saw earlier with a bunch of different elements. There's lots of walls, there's locked doors, there's there's roofs that automatically disappear when your player tokens go underneath them. There's a lot of sounds and a lot of lights. So I'm gonna show you how to kind of nest all of these together, and we're just gonna build up towards that. Okay, so looking at this this vendor here, I've got some pieces that I'm gonna put together. I've got the tile, obviously. I've got actually 2 lights. So I'm gonna put those lights right over the fire. I've got some walls, and then I've got the sound of a crackling fire that gets louder as you get closer. So I'm gonna put all that together. Now I'm gonna drag a token out. So I'm gonna use my dot token. You can use any token for this. I'll hold down Alt to make it disappear, although you can always change that afterwards. And maybe I'll give it a name. I'll call it food vendor. You don't have to give it a name, but it'll help you differentiate it. And by the way, I have my token set up to where just the GM can hover over it and see what it is. No one else can do that. And then what I'll do is open up with the token selected. I'll open up my UI for token attacher, and let's try to use the lasso tool. So I'm going to lasso everything here. I get a confirmation that I added something. So let's move things around and see if it works. So I can see my lights are moving. Let's see if my walls, yep, my walls are in place. My sound is where it's supposed to be. So this looks pretty good. We just made a token attached set. Now let's make a prefab out of it. So what you can do is you can take any of these and you can just, any actor, and duplicate it. And I'm going to call this food vendor 1. And I'm going to open up its prototype token. I'm going to have this selected and I'm going to say assign token. Now what I've done is if I look for food vendor 1, this is the one that I just created. And if I drag this out, there you go. I've got my vendor. I can rotate him around. I can put him in any configuration. I can tuck him into the corner of a street. He's basically mine to put anywhere I want. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to tuck my vendor over here where I planned for him to go. This looks like a good spot, and I'll get to him a little bit later. Okay, so let's do the same thing with this fortune teller tent. First thing I'm going to do is I'm using the roofs module, so I'm going to right click and make this a roof. That will make it automatically disappear when my players go underneath it. I've got some special walls built in here so that I can see the top of the tent, but my players can't see out. I've got 2 lights really centered around that orb there, and I think that's all I've got in here. So let's drag another control token out and use my dot again. Hold down Alt, call this fortune, and then I'm going to put all my pieces together. I think it's all in the right spot. Let me see if I did set it up where the door, when it opens up, that light pours out, which I really like that effect. So let's put everything together and go back to our control token, turn on our token attacher UI, select everything tool, and we'll lasso it all together. By the way, all of those walls I set at 8 feet. I'm using the wall height module. You don't have to use that, but it's just to illustrate an example of how other modules metadata can be wrapped up into it. It does open up the config for the walls though after you do that the first time. It won't show it again. So now let's see if I correctly attached everything. My walls moved. I think I saw my light move there, and of course my tiles move. So this looks pretty good for a prefab. So let's duplicate another actor. Any actor will do. We'll call this fortune teller. Open up a prototype token, select it, and then say assign token. And we're set. Now we've got a fortune teller that we can drop into any map that we feel like. So I've already, let's see, let's grab her and pull her up. Turn down the ambient sound a little bit. And this looks like a pretty good spot for her. Now what we want to do is we want to put all of these together. So if we drag out another control token, this time I'll pull out a larger token, just so it's got a bigger area there. Okay, and now we'll see if we drag this over. And you can see everything dragged with it. Now, these are a lot of moving pieces and a lot of parts, so it's going to have a lot of calculations to do with something of this complex. That's essentially how you make a really complex prefab that then you can break up into its pieces again. So if I open up and delete everything from that, then I should be able to just grab one of these things, like this wagon, and move it out. And there's my scrolls, there's my herbalist, and I can rearrange things as I want to. I can even delete whole elements, like maybe I don't want a cobble floor and I don't want these little kind of bridges for all the mud that people are walking over. I can delete all of these things, rearrange them, and build it how I like. Okay, so now let's look at how to build a, deploy a bunch of soldiers like you saw earlier on. So this is one of my, these are a bunch of prefab elements. This is, like a tower, and, these are guard, this is basically the gates for the fort. But I've set it up to where there's a battle that's going to take place here. So let's find some soldiers. Let's actually find, let's take these guards out. So maybe we have a captain that's going to be our control token. And we'll set him up here. And then let's get some spearmen out. And we'll have them kind of spammed all over the place. And like any good phalanx, you've probably got some shield bearers at the front. All right. So, and if I had preset these up with, actual stat blocks, then, even better. So now I've got my essential unit here. So we'll make him our control unit. So we'll select him, open up our UI, and then we'll do the select everything tool. And we'll connect all of these gentlemen to him. Close that, and then let's move them around and see if we've made it. Okay, great. So now we can rotate this unit around. We can break the unit up. So if I wanted to do that, I would just open up my UI and I would hit my garbage can and it would detach all these pieces so that they can go fight individually. But that gives me my unit here. And what I can do is I'll just copy one of these guys, say duplicate, and we'll call this Phalanx. And let's find that one again. Here's the one that we just built. Go to our prototype token. Make sure that we've got our token selected, neutral, hostile, friendly. We'll say these are the bad guys. Actually, it'll assign it to what this guy is. All right, so now we've created our phalanx and we can deploy it as many times as we want in whatever configuration we want. Okay, so the last thing I'll show you is how to resize things. So let's take a tree. And if we right-click it, or double right-click it, we can get into the config of it. And let's say we want this tree to be 3 times larger. So I'll use this here. This scale ratio thing doesn't work for this type of effort. And we'll scale it up. And all of a sudden, we have a tree that's 3 times as big. So let's save this. Let's call this large tree. And we'll select its prototype token, assign it. And now let's go into this 200 DPI. That was a 100 DPI square map. Let's go into 200 DPI square map. And let's look up large tree, drag it out. And you can see the tree takes up the same number of squares that it did in the 100 DPI map. That's because Token Attacher with this new release will automatically scale the tree to the appropriate size for the map that it's sitting on. So that's really good stuff. And hopefully you guys really enjoyed this. I hope it gave you some ideas on what you can build with Token Attacher and what more you can do with it. This is just a game changer, I think, for what's available in terms of content and ready-made content for GMs, for Foundry, and really for VTTs in general. So I hope you guys get it, pick it up, use it. There's going to be some bugs. It's a 4.0, and it was a major change in code. So if you find bugs, KLG is really accessible and really responsive to get stuff fixed. But yeah, that's it. Hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions about anything I did specifically that you want me to go into further detail, just let me know in the comments. And otherwise, have fun making your maps.